Greetings, pet lovers. Bridget here with First Street Pets, and today we're going to talk about evacuating your horses during a fire. Having lived in California all my life, in recent years especially, we have experienced a series of fires and other disasters on an unprecedented level. So this is definitely something that everyone needs to be aware of if you are in a fire zone or in an area where there are other disasters where you may need to evacuate. Between 2017 and 2020, as of today, which is September of 2020, California has had over 33,000 wildfires, burning over 5 million acres of land and killing nearly 200 people. And this is just in California. Turn on the news any day and you'll see fires in Colorado, Utah, Arizona, even Oregon and Washington. It's crazy. The purpose of this video is not to frighten you, but to let you know that you need to be aware, and as a horse owner, you need to make plans and be prepared so that you can get out quickly and safely when the time comes. This is a good time to give a shout out to our firefighters and other first responders and all others who were involved in keeping us safe and saving lives and property during these terrible fires. We want to thank you and we appreciate you for all the sacrifices you make for us. One of the ways that we can honor them is to keep ourselves safe and to follow evacuation orders as soon as they come down. Because when folks refuse to evacuate, delay and wait till the last minute, or don't do things properly, obviously we put ourselves at risk, we put our animals at risk, and we also put first responders at risk because they have to come back into areas that they thought they'd already cleared to come and rescue you. First, let's talk about preparation. If you're anywhere on the West Coast at this point, you need to be preparing for a fire. If you have horses, this involves training. I can't tell you how many tragic stories I've heard of horses who were unable to be saved because their owners had to turn them loose at the time of the fire because the horses were not trained, they would run away from people, they're not halter broke, or they just simply won't go in a trailer. So if you haven't gotten around to doing these things with your horse, now is the time. This is not a training video, so I will put some links in the description, whatever good resources I can find for you, whether other videos, articles about training your horses to lead and go into a trailer. This is super important because if you can't do this, the day to start training is not the day you have to evacuate. If you are evacuating dogs and cats, obviously you need cat carriers and dog leashes. You also need some equipment for your horses. Now, if you're riding your horses and doing stuff all the time, you probably have these things at hand. You'll have halters and leads of different sizes and whatnot. But if not, or if you've had that same halter sitting in the barn for 10 years and it's falling apart, now might be a good time to upgrade and get some good equipment. I personally use rope halters for daily use and for training, but for trailering, especially horses I don't know or horses that may pull back, just your basic flat nylon or leather halter is a good choice. And a nice solid lead to get them into the trailer, to tie them at the trailer, to get them where you need to go. So make sure you have this equipment on hand and that it is in good condition. You will want to have enough trailer space for all of your horses or all the horses on your property. My breed is the Norwegian Fjord, and we say, as I'm sure the owners of every other breed say, that you can't just have one. They're like potato chips. And so then you get another one and somebody gives you one and maybe there's a rescue. So it can be easy to end up with too many horses, just like too many cats or dogs. But the reality is, in an emergency, you need to be able to move those animals off of your property. And the only way to do that is in a trailer. So if you have 7 horses and an old 2-horse trailer that's been sitting out in a field for 5 years, you're in trouble. even if you get that trailer working and start taking them out, depending on how easy it is to get out of where you live and how far you have to drive to evacuate, you may not have time to make that many multiple trips. So just think about that and try to have enough space for all the horses you have on your property, or if you don't, to network with other friends who may have larger trailers, stock trailers, or even trailers that are for cattle that could be used in an emergency. If you own your own trailer, make sure that it is in good working condition. Sometimes we get busy and we may not go anywhere or ride, and the trailer may sit there for months. Well, a lot can happen in that time. Rodents and insects and birds can get inside. They can damage the wiring. They can cause all sorts of issues. If you are not the primary person who hooks up the trailer, now would be a good time to learn. There's a lot of little steps that you have to go through to do it correctly and safely. So even if you're not riding a lot, from time to time, make sure that you hook up the trailer, drive it around, make sure that everything is working. You want to check the lights, the brakes, and also make sure there's air in the tires. I made this mistake myself recently because I'd only been trailering around very locally, so I didn't notice that the tires were a little bit on the low side. But when I recently had to evacuate, put 2 horses in the trailer, there was a little more weight, I noticed that I was kind of low riding. So fortunately, my friend has an air compressor, so we were able to fill up those tires, as well as the spare tire, which had also become low. So it's easy to become complacent when everything is going fine or you're not doing a whole lot with your trailer. But when crunch time comes, you want everything to be in good working condition and that you know how to operate it. Keep gas in the tank of your truck. I've had my truck for over 20 years now. It was one of the first Toyota Tundras, and I love it for many reasons, including that it's gas efficient for a truck, but I still have to look the other way when I fill up at the gas station as I see those numbers ticking up and up and up. But I want that tank to be full because if something happens, I want to be able to load up and go. We've had, as I mentioned, a lot of fires here recently, and scares and evacuations and panic situations, also with COVID. When those things happen, everybody goes to the gas station. And at the most recent evacuation, every gas station in town had a line down the street. So if you were in a hurry, you would not be able to get gas. So just do that ahead of time. Try to keep your gas tank full. And if it's not a vehicle that you use a lot, try to drive it at least once a week, take it on the freeway, go somewhere, even if it's something you primarily use for hauling or around the ranch. I can't stress enough how important it is to keep all that equipment in good running condition. If you don't own your own trailer and you're relying on someone else for a ride, make sure that you have an agreement and make sure that you discuss this from time to time, especially approaching fire season. Your friend may have offered to help you 5 years ago, but now when the day comes, they may not be able to. So make sure that whatever agreements you have made are still current and that your friends or associates or riding buddies with trailers will be able to help you when the day comes. As part of your preparation, it is very important to have a plan as to where you will go. You do not want to start looking for an alternate location the day of the evacuation order, because it's very unlikely that you will find a place that is available. So have these things planned out. Maybe you have a friend with a private property that's far enough out of your area, that's out of the fire danger zone generally. There may be other boarding facilities that have a lot of space that would be able to take you depending on how many horses you have. Obviously, one horse is easier than a bunch, but look into all these options ahead of time. Generally, in disasters, temporary shelters will be set up, often at a fairgrounds or another large area where you could bring a lot of animals. But you'll want to look into these things ahead of time and have a plan and an agreement. And just like with the trailer ride, if it's a private property of a friend or an associate that you're planning on going to, make sure that those agreements are current and that they're okay with you doing this so that when crunch time comes, you can just load up and go and there won't be any problem when you get there. It's very important to keep your vaccinations up to date, and this, I'm not going to get into a discussion about what kind of care you provide. Some people like to vaccinate for everything. Some people do so minimally. Some people don't believe in vaccines. Whatever your practices are, If you're going to a location with a lot of other horses, they may require you to have vaccines and proof of those vaccines. And it's also a good idea because if your horse is at home alone or with one other horse for the last 10 years, you're probably not in any danger of contracting a disease. But if you're going to a boarding facility with 150 other stressed out horses, those chances go up significantly. So I would recommend keeping those vaccines current, maybe doing vaccines that you don't normally do at home, like strangles, or other vaccines that you may do only if you're traveling a lot, going to shows. Have all that done and have the paperwork at hand. Now, ideally, you can store all that stuff on a cloud like Dropbox or another service like that, Google Drive, so that you can access it from anywhere. You're not looking for a piece of paper when the day comes. If you don't know how to use those things, if you're not tech savvy, one easy way is just to take a picture of the paperwork with your phone and just save it in a file on your phone. That way you have a picture of it and you have the dates and information about vaccines and other important medical information. You will want to have plenty of supplies to take with you. Now, I am not the person you want doing inventory because I buy things when they run out. So I try to always have somebody else do my inventory for me. You want to have plenty of hay, grain, any other feed that you give your horses, supplements, medications, whatever else they need on a daily basis. You want to be able to grab that, or at least as much of that as you can fit in your truck and trailer when you're going to your evacuation location. You're also going to want any other kind of barn supplies, grooming kits, hoof care, fly sprays, anything else that you need on a day-to-day basis. Shavings if your horse is in a stall or will be in a stall. Manure forks, brooms, buckets. Most boarding facilities have those things, but in an emergency, horses may be put up in other areas like a round pen or an arena. And you may need to do self-care because the boarding facility has way more horses than they normally have. So it's not a bad idea to take all that stuff with you as much as you can fit in your rig. That way you'll be prepared when you get to the location where you're evacuating. For yourself, you don't know how long of a day you'll be having or what the weather will be like, so some extra clothes, maybe a long sleeve if you were wearing only short sleeves at the time, some snacks like granola bars, things that keep really well, some bottled water, a flashlight. I love those headlamps. I don't know how I went so many years without buying one. They're very inexpensive. I'll put a link in the description, or you can buy them at many sporting good and other types of stores. You want to have all these items at hand because, again, you don't want to be going to the store when the panic hits because everyone will be at the grocery store. When I went to my grocery store after the whole COVID panic started, I found one flat of water in the whole store and I set it down to turn around and buy some oatmeal or something. Turn around, it was gone. Somebody grabbed it. So have these things ahead of time, especially like flats of bottled water, things like granola bars, things that can keep for a while. Just have those on hand at the barn and rotate them out every couple of months. So now it's crunch time and it's evacuation day. So my first piece of advice to you is go now, just like they say. Don't wait. Don't hope for the best. If law enforcement is telling you it's time to go, it's time to go. Help yourself, help your animals, help them to get in and do what they need to do to control the fire. I have heard some crazy stories from people over the years about folks who didn't want to evacuate. One lady who was way out in the country on the mountain in an area with only one windy road in and out refused to evacuate and stated that when the fire came, she would get in the bathtub and that would save her. I've heard of people wanting to hose their roof down with the garden hose and things like that, and they have no idea fire moves quickly. It is extremely hot and can kill people and animals in seconds. So if you need to go, go. Don't think that you're going to stay and make a stand because you'll probably end up losing your life. Roads clog up quickly when evacuation orders come down. Just like I mentioned about gas stations and grocery stores, if you haven't experienced yourself, you've probably seen it in the news where there's hundreds and thousands of cars on the freeway all at once. Not to mention, many horse properties are out in the country with narrow, long roads, and maybe there's only one way in and out. So you want to get ready and go as quickly as you can to hopefully avoid or minimize that. Whereas if you wait till the last minute, all those roads are going to be jam-packed. You're going to sit there for hours or maybe not even be able to go anywhere. During one of the fires in recent years, I went down to San Francisco for my high school reunion, and then I couldn't get back because Highway 101 was closed. So folks who may have been trying to get in or out couldn't. They were literally pulling over to the side of the road, sleeping in their cars, or hanging out in a store parking lot because they couldn't get anywhere. I recommend that you have a companion with you while you're evacuating, preferably a horse person, but even if not, just another person to be there to make sure that you're safe, to help you do different things. They can gather up supplies, they can open doors for you, double check things for you, even if they don't necessarily know how to handle horses. Because chances are, if you're evacuating, there's not going to be a lot of other people around. You may be there alone. If you fall or anything else happens to you, nobody else is going to know. So having somebody else with you will make things go more quickly, more efficiently, and more safely. So now you've got your truck, your trailer, you're there, you're ready to load. Number one thing to do, take a deep breath. Remain calm. I don't have to tell a horse person that horses pick up on your energy. Try to ride when you're having a problem or a bad day. It's not going to happen. If you remain calm, the horses will be as calm as they can be. If you are in a panic and upset and rushing, the horses will pick up on that. They may run away from you. They may be difficult to handle, difficult to load. So it's going to take you longer to get out of there. They could get hurt. You could get hurt. So just take a moment to balance and center yourself. Keep steady with your plan. Load up the horses and go. If your horses live on a large pasture, or if you know they're difficult to catch, help yourself out by feeding them ahead of time in a stall or a catch pen. So now, at least in California, we're seeing the evacuation orders come through much earlier and for a much larger area than in the past. Some people find this inconvenient because they don't want to evacuate, but what that's doing is giving you more time to get out. So you may have days instead of hours or minutes, like in 2017 when people around here were literally running for their lives from a fire that was coming up over the hill. So if you know that you're going to have to get out, if you've had a warning or you just know that things aren't going well, even though the evacuation order hasn't come through yet, bring your horses in. Feed them in a round pen, in a stall, in some kind of a catch pen, just so they're going to be that much easier to catch if needed. So you've got your horses loaded, you're ready to head out, just like you would at any time. Double check all your connections, walk around your rig, make sure everything's hooked up the way it's supposed to be, doors are closed and locked, and nothing looks out of the ordinary. One time I was visiting friends in Oregon after going to a horse show. I was leaving their home, I'd loaded up my horse, and we got to chit-chatting as I was leaving. Got in the truck, drove away. Drove probably 100 miles before I pulled into a gas station, went over a bump, and my trailer came right off the hitch because I hadn't locked it. So thank God those little emergency chains were on there, and I was only in a gas station. So I was able to lift the trailer back up and get it back on the hitch where I then locked it correctly. But because I let myself get distracted and then I wanted to get going, I just jumped in the driver's seat and drove away. I had missed that very important step that could have led to a really bad accident. So when going to your new location, drive safely. Don't speed, don't hang corners. You have precious cargo in the back. You want to be safe. Other people may be out on the road panicking, so be extra careful. Watch where you're going. Drive as slowly as you need to get to your destination. When you get there, your horses will probably be whinnying and excited like all the other horses at the location, but it's a good idea to scope out where they're going to go before you take them out of the trailer. This could be a large boarding facility. It could be someplace you've never been before. So park your rig in a safe place, get out and talk to whoever's in charge, figure out where your horses are going to be located on the property, and get that all set up before offloading. It's a good idea to check the footing, check the fencing, see where the food and water will be, and kind of get a feel for everything, make sure it's all safe and all set up properly, and then unload your horses, because you don't want to have to reload them and drive somewhere else or be walking around a large property with really excited horses. When housing horses in an emergency situation like this, be aware of who gets along and who doesn't. Now, I'm a big proponent of natural living and pastures and herds and all that, but some horses don't get along with others too well, or they don't get along with certain ones. So you really want to be aware of that while you are in a different location. So co-housing can certainly be helpful for their mental well-being, for them to feel more comfortable. If there are a couple horses that get along, that's great. But for example, my Arab mixed gelding, Sonny, loves mares. I could house him with a dozen mares, but throw another gelding in there with the mares and he might attack him. So knowing that about him, I would never house him in that way. He would be by himself or with other mares with whom he is comfortable. Some horses are food aggressive. They will guard the food and eat every bit of it and not let anyone else eat. I even met a horse once, a Percheron of all things, who would guard the water trough and he would stand there and not let anybody else drink. So be aware of these things and these relationships. And if you're at all concerned about the horses, then just separate them and let each one have their own area, if it's possible, at the location where you're evacuating. Once you've offloaded your horses, give them some hay. Nothing calms horses down more than eating. The act of eating is calming. It takes them a long time to eat, and also lowering their heads to the ground to eat is a calming signal. So that's going to help them to relax and settle in. Before leaving, if you're not going to be staying at this location yourself, you want to make sure that a few things are in place. One, that the horses have ID. If they're in a stall, you can put the information on the stall door, as is typically done on boarding facilities. The horse's name, feeding and medication instructions, your name and phone number. If it's more of a temporary situation where it's set up with temporary areas at a fairgrounds or something like that, or just out in a field with panels or electric tape, putting ID on your horse is a good idea. And here's a couple of good ways of doing that I've heard from others. One is that you can write your phone number and other information on the horse's hooves with a Sharpie. So that's one possibility that's kind of basic. There's nothing to fall off. I do not recommend leaving halters or anything like that on a horse. It is really unsafe, especially in an area that they're not familiar with, where they could get excited. Halters can catch on things and break their neck, so I don't recommend that. I was reading on the Red Rover site that you can use a livestock crayon. I don't have a livestock crayon, but if you happen to have one, if you have cattle or whatever, you might use a livestock crayon on, or maybe just buy one to have in your emergency kit. You can just write things on the side of the animal, and it's something that's harmless and can wash off later. Also, a friend told me another easy way to do it is just to stick a piece of duct tape on the hindquarters and write your phone number or information on that. So these are all things that are temporary but will last long enough. If the horses get loose or if someone doesn't know who they belong to, then they can be identified and you can be contacted. You can also braid an ID tag into your horse's mane if your horse has a long mane. And obviously this is something that needs to be purchased ahead of time, but you may even have an extra dog tag laying around the house or something with your phone number on it. Maybe one of your dogs passed away and you kept the tag. You can use that. You can order them online, but of course that takes time. You can buy them in many stores on demand. They have the little machines where you just punch in your info and it engraves the tag for you. But that's a somewhat more permanent solution, provided it doesn't fall out of their hair. And you can put your name or the horse's name and any phone numbers on that, just like you would for your dog. So if you're not staying at the location where the horses are, I recommend that you check them daily. If you're providing self-care, obviously you'll be there a couple times a day anyway. But if someone else is feeding, it's always a good idea to make sure that they're doing okay, that they're being fed the way they're supposed to. If you can't, if you have to work or you're staying far away, try to find a trusted friend or another horse person to check for you and keep in touch with you and to let you know right away if there are any problems. Some horses handle change well. Wherever you go, they'll put their head down and eat and they'll drink water and then poop and there'll be no problems. Other horses tend to stress out. So if your horse may be in danger of colicking or having some other health problem, you want to know as soon as possible. So to wrap it up, in conclusion, number 1, be prepared, especially if you're in a fire zone. Number 2, don't panic, don't rush, but go right away. Get everything together and go right away. Have a plan for where you're going to go. Make sure your horses have instructions and ID, and be sure to check on them daily until you can safely return home. Thank you so much for watching this video. I would love to hear about your experiences, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said here today, and if you have any other ideas about how horses can be kept safe during an evacuation.